Hey everybody, welcome back to some more early morning barking, talking about BPD and NPD by somebody that has both. Don't forget to hit the like and the subscribe button and follow me on social media and all that stuff. And now we'll get right to it. So get comfy. This one is a bit of a long one and comes with a story. I've talked about obsession with various things recently, obsession with stuff and hobbies and doing things and collecting things, and also romantic obsession where you're just besotted with somebody and can't let them go. But there's one that I haven't talked about, and that's the non-romantic obsession with people. Not in a favorite person kind of a way. That's a different thing. This is more of a hero worship obsession kind of way. So let's start the story. So, an alarming number of years ago, I started out in a business venture with some friends to run a video production company. And there were four of us working on this thing together. There was me, who was doing all the sort of web design and programming stuff and music stuff. There were a couple of friends who were doing video work on PC. And then there was a graphic designer who insisted on working on something called a Mac. Now, none of us had one of these. I'd used one at school, but that was it. And then suddenly this guy was insisting that he absolutely needed a Mac to do work on. And this thing cost a fortune, right? There were thousands of pounds. It was a power Mac with G5 processors in it and dual monitors back when no one had dual monitors and that sort of thing. It was great, but huge and expensive. And three of us didn't really understand why the fourth one needed this thing. And one day, I happened to be in the office on my own, doing a little bit of animation for a video on my laptop, and I'm looking at this Mac over in the corner of the room and eyeing it up and thinking, you know, all the software I'm using on this laptop is installed on that Mac. What if, while no one was watching, what if I went and had a go and did my work over there, and then maybe I'll find out what he's been banging on about with needing this Mac. And I needed to be sort of physically removed from it 48 hours later. There was no way on earth after doing that I could go back to working on a shitty Windows laptop. That couldn't happen anymore. Consequently, here's a picture of me hugging my first Mac. And there have been many since, in various forms. There's one downstairs right now. I don't really want to not have one. I'm doing this on a Windows PC because cheapness and because, well, we can debate the value for money of Macs over the last 5 years, but I love these things. They're how I work. We can debate that all day. That's not really what the story's about. The reason why I had to tell you that is because it leads us to this next bit where I'm sat at home browsing on the internet, getting some work done, whatever, on my Mac. And it suddenly occurred to me, what the hell is this operating system I'm using? I've never really thought about it. We know about Windows 95 and Windows 2000 and all the other things, but this was just a Mac, right? I didn't know what Mac OS was. It wasn't called Mac OS, it was OS 10. I can't even remember what version it was. Puma? Something like that. Anyway, it suddenly occurred to me, how old's this operating system? Is there a new one coming? Are there other things coming? So I started searching. And I found, for the first time, Steve Jobs' keynote presentations. Here was the guy who ran the company going on stage and doing this incredible presentation that told you exactly why his products were the best products in the world and why you needed them and why you were probably an idiot if you didn't agree with him. And my God, was I obsessed right away. So you start learning stuff. You start looking up, who is this person? Where did they come from? What did they do? And let's be fair, that story with Steve Jobs is quite an interesting one. I mean, look, here's a guy who's instrumental in creating the home computer space. He's friends with Steve Wozniak, who was the first guy to put a keyboard on a computer and press a letter where it showed up on the screen. This is the level of amazingness that we're talking about when you look at these people's backstories. And then you start to learn some of the more complicated stuff about individuals. Again, with Steve Jobs in particular, there's some really fucked up, nasty stories. And yet, with the obsession, these nasty stories didn't show up in my brain as nasty stories. They're all tales of narcissism, of treating people like shit to get what you want out of them and get done what you want to get done. That is the essence of a lot of Steve Jobs stories. And it carried on. It worked its way into my being on a daily basis. We've talked about absorbing personalities. I absorbed Steve Jobs like a fucking sponge. It was hideous. That is not a personality that you want to have take over you for a period of years. And it came out in work. This is where my NPD played out, in work, in relationships with people that I was trying to work with. And I became horrible. I became obnoxious and rude and vile in every possible way. This is where it all started to come out, and it all came out of this obsession with this one man who you just found. If you shout at people enough, if you upset them enough, you will get good things from them. That's bollocks, isn't it? And then Steve became really ill. Really very ill. And I started to worry a lot about that, as did a lot of people. And it turns out with good reason. There was a time when people began to doubt his health, and he said, you know, if I'm ever not well enough to run Apple, I will step aside. And that night came when I happened to look on the website, and there was the open letter from Steve Jobs to the world saying, I'm stepping aside. And then a week, 2 weeks later, something like that, he was gone. And then the obsession really started, because when somebody passes away, that's when it's time for the books to come out. That's when it's time for other things to come out. So you read this book and this book and this book and this book and watch this movie and this movie and that movie and the other movie. And here's a picture of me stood outside the guy's fucking office. It wasn't good. That personality ruined a lot of relationships, a lot of friendships, a lot of working relationships. I think that personality and that attitude is why people aren't overly keen on working with me again. I can't say I blame them. It ate me up. It just became who I was, and everything that Steve did was the right thing to do. It wasn't just absorbing a personality. It wasn't just taking on somebody's traits. There was an admiration there. There was a glee at the bad things that they did. I didn't look at Steve Jobs and think, well, it's not good that he treats people like this. I looked at it and thought, yeah, you get on with that, Steve. You get on with that. My favorite thing about the man was how they fired him from Apple and then ended up having to hire him back. Isn't that the biggest fuck you middle finger in all of history in business? I mean, that delighted and amazed me so much. He was the guy who they took everything from, and he just said, I'm not done yet, though. And then he went and made Pixar. And next, and came back to Apple and invented helped invent iPods and iPads and many other things that I've spent a ridiculous amount of money on over the years. I couldn't separate that bit of it out from the yelling, from the obnoxiousness, from the narcissism, from that belief of being better from everybody else and being right all the time. And if you just make people feel bad enough, you'll get out of them what you want. It wasn't until his replacement came along. It feels weird that all of this is linked to business dealings at Apple, by the way. I'm aware of this. I'm just a total nerd. I can't. I'm sat here in a Gremlins t-shirt. What do you want from me? When Tim Cook came along, he was somebody that had all these great traits that Steve Jobs had, but didn't have all the negative traits. Tim was known as a nice guy who treated people well, who could have his scary moments, let's be honest. You don't become the CEO of the biggest company in human history without being able to put the wind up people a little bit. But generally, here was a guy who was clearly so much a nicer person than the guy he replaced. And it was little things. It was like suddenly Apple employees are marching in the San Francisco Pride Parade. It was suddenly, if Apple employees make a charitable donation out of their wage packet, then Apple will match that charitable donation. Things, little tweaks that make you realize, oh shit, was Steve Jobs not a nice guy? Was he just a bit self-obsessed to a certain extent, like really laser focused, and everything else can go to shit? And you realize, yeah, he was a great guy. He did some wonderful things, and I'm very sure that the people that knew him loved him very much. But as a model for how to treat people, not a good one. And that obsession just pulled me along with it. If I act and think like that, I can be like that because that person's amazing. They've done what I want to do. I want to achieve like that. They have the same thing that drives them that I have. That desire to do something significant, that desire to make a dent in the world. But it's not that simple, is it? I'm not Steve Jobs. I'm not the CEO of a large multinational corporation. I haven't invented iPods. I did the first Star Trek podcast that went on those iPods, but no one really remembers that. That obsession just ruined me for a couple of years. I don't know where it came from, really. It was those traits that I admired, but they were all narcissistic traits. What I actually admired was the guy that was doing what I was trying to do just a billion times better. And it broke me. And it wasn't until that person was replaced in the same role and I got to see somebody doing it arguably better, or at least more nicely, then that sort of broke through a little bit. And you watch the Pirates of Silicon Valley again and you realize, oh yeah, all that stuff where he refuses to accept that his daughter is his, that's not great, is it? That's not amazing. And the cracks just get bigger and you let go of that obsession. It's been a long time now since I've felt that. And at the time, it felt like something of a relief to feel that admiration, that hero worship, because with the narcissism, you lose that, right? Who am I going to worship? Who am I going to think is better than me? I'm the best person, right? and you're all thinking the same thing, who are we going to worship? There's something humiliating about admiring somebody else like that, isn't there? There's something degrading about it, almost submissive about it. It's like you're admitting, I'm not as good as somebody else. I will like this person. And when somebody came along that I could feel that way about, to a certain extent, it made me feel normal. It made me feel this sense, this feeling that other people seem to feel of hero worship, of being able to admire somebody else and acknowledge somebody else's accomplishments. It was just because of my own raging narcissism that it took the head narcissist to be that person. Because I don't know who else was going to do that. That again, that whole experience was the beginning of the cracks in my own NPD. The beginning of, should I not treat people like this? Is this why people don't call me for a chat? Is this why I go to fewer parties these days? Is this what's going on? I'm just treating people like shit, and for some reason they don't seem to like it. So in a sense, that obsession damaged me a lot, but it also helped me in the end. And now I'm on a much more even keel, and I'm much more aware of narcissistic traits and how they affect people. I can separate one out from the other. I can look at the grey in people. The world isn't as black and white as the BPD would like it to be all the time, or as Twitter would like it to be all the time. There are grey areas in between. This person is just a person. They're not all good or all bad. They did some things that were meaningful and made that dent in the world, but they also did some shitty things that upset people. And you have to acknowledge it all together, or you get messed up by it. And it was the beginning of the end for me. That it took a long time. It's still happening. You know, I'm not sat here cured. But that was the beginning. In a way, I kind of needed that obsession. But if it hadn't broken, if it hadn't come to an end, I don't know where it was going to stop. I don't know, that implies something stalkerish. I don't know. That was never going to happen. But yeah, it was a weird time. It really was. And I'd like to find a way to admire people without obsessing over them. That seems to be more and more possible as my own narcissism levels drop off significantly. That's part of it, right? I've talked about not being able to enjoy things and all of that because we're sat there just hating it for whatever reason. Anyway, I think that's the end of my Steve Jobs story for now. Let me know if you've ever been obsessed with anyone. I'm interested to know what form it takes. It was all narcissistic for me, and he was a model for behavior that didn't end well. Anyway, I'll see you later. Bye.